Basketball has always been my favorite sport. When I was a kid, living in a small apartment with my mom, watching games was my way to have fun. I'd sit in front of our little TV for hours, learning all about the players and hoping that one day I could see a game in real life. Now that I'm grown up and earning my own money, I make sure to go to a few games every season. Last month, the championship team was coming to town and tickets were sold out everywhere. In my desperation, I turned to Craigslist. I know, not my brightest moment, but I thought I was being smart about it. I messaged only people willing to meet in person. I wasn't about to get scammed by some faceless internet stranger. When this woman responded and agreed to meet, I felt relieved. She even sent me her home address. Who would do that if they were planning to scam someone? She texted me suggesting we meet at her place the next day at 2 p.m., but asked me to send the money to her Venmo first as proof that I was serious about buying. I asked if I could just pay her when we met in person instead. She refused, explaining that she'd had too many no-shows in the past, and reassured me by reminding me that I had her address if anything went wrong. That made sense to me. I mean, she gave me her actual home address. What scammer does that? So I sent the money, $350 for 2 tickets. And then, nothing. No response to my texts, no answer to my calls. After waiting a full day, I decided to drive to her address. It was a modest house in a quiet neighborhood. I checked the mailbox. Sure enough, her name was on some envelopes. This was definitely her place. I knocked on the door, but no one answered. I waited around for 20 minutes before leaving. On the drive home, anger bubbled inside me. $350 might not seem like much to some people, but it was a lot to me. I've been saving up for those tickets. That's when I had an idea. I looked her up on Facebook and found her profile right away. This woman wasn't exactly a tech genius. Her profile was public, and she had recently posted a picture of herself in her backyard, which I recognized from Google Maps Street View. Same fence, same weird garden gnome collection. When I scrolled through her page, I noticed she had shared a video from a TikTok account with the caption "My son being silly again." The account had maybe 200 followers. I clicked through and saw it was managed by a kid who couldn't have been more than 9 years old. Now, I have a decent following on TikTok, about 100,000 followers from posting basketball trick shots and commentary. That's when the plan formed in my mind. I messaged the kid directly. I introduced myself as a basketball TikToker with a large following and complimented his content. I told him I could get all my followers to follow him, but mentioned I needed a favor first. The kid responded almost immediately, clearly excited by the prospect. He asked what kind of favor I wanted. I explained that his mom had accidentally taken some money from me, and if he could send it back using her phone, I'd make sure all my followers checked out his page. The kid expressed hesitation about using his mom's phone without permission. I reassured him it wasn't wrong because his mom actually owed me the money, so he'd just be helping fix a mistake. I also reminded him of all the followers he would gain. I knew it was wrong as I typed it, but in that moment, all I could think about was getting my money back from someone who had stolen from me first. 20 minutes later, the money appeared back in my Venmo account with a message from her account saying, "Sorry." I immediately blocked the kid's TikTok and the woman's Venmo. 2 days later, my phone blew up with texts from an unknown number. The woman was furious, demanding to know who I thought I was. She accused me of manipulating her child to steal money from her and asked if I was stalking them. She called my actions disgusting, especially using a child the way I did. She emphasized she was a struggling single mother and threatened to report me to TikTok and expose me to all my followers. The messages went on and on. My heart raced as I read them. Had I gone too far? But then I remembered how she'd scammed me in the first place. I replied simply that she should call the police if she thought I had done something wrong to her. She never responded after that. I guess she knew she couldn't explain to the police how I'd gotten her money back without admitting she scammed me first. A week later, I used that same $350 to buy legitimate tickets through the Arena Box office. When I sat watching the game I've been dreaming about, I still felt conflicted about what I'd done. I got my money back, but involving a kid definitely crossed a line. The woman never contacted me again, and I never bought anything on Craigslist again. After years of therapy and finally coming to terms with what happened, I feel ready to talk about it. This isn't just any entitled person story. This is about my mother, the woman who should have protected me, but instead became the monster I feared most. As a kid, my mom cared a lot about appearances. We had the biggest house in the neighborhood, and she never let anyone forget it. She always made a fuss over the tiniest problems and insisted on speaking to managers everywhere we went. I got used to it over time, learning to stay quiet and blend into the background whenever she lost her temper. My father had left when I was 7, unable to handle her controlling behavior anymore. That left just me to bear the brunt of her outbursts. In public, she was perfect mom, volunteering at school functions and hosting neighborhood gatherings. But behind closed doors, she criticized everything I did, from my grades to how I folded laundry. Halloween was always a trigger point. She hated the holiday, the noise, the children, the disruption to her routine. Each year she'd turn off all the lights and pretend we weren't home. But that one Halloween when I was 12 changed everything. I remember it clearly. A group of neighborhood kids came by early, around 5:30 p.m. The sun was just starting to set, and they were eager to get their trick-or-treating started. I was watching from the window, wishing I could join them in their colorful costumes. There were maybe 5 or 6 of them, all younger than me. My mother saw them approaching our walkway and stormed to the door. She yelled at them, complaining that they were too early and it wasn't even dark yet. She asked them angrily what was with all the noise and if they couldn't see. She was trying to watch her soap opera. I could see the confusion on their faces through the window. One little boy, dressed as a pirate with an eye patch, spoke up. He politely explained to my mother that it was Halloween and they were just trick-or-treating. My mother told them she didn't care what day it was. She claimed it was her property and they were disturbing her peace. She ordered them to leave immediately. The children started backing away, clearly frightened. But my mother wasn't finished. She pointed at the pirate boy. She singled him out, accusing him of being the one making all the noise. She demanded that he come to her, saying she wanted to talk to him. Before anyone could react, she grabbed the boy by his arm and pulled him inside our house, slamming and locking the door behind her. The other children ran away in terror. My stomach dropped. I had been hiding in the hallway, but now I stepped forward. I asked my mother what she was doing, telling her she couldn't just grab someone's kid. My mother snapped at me to mind my own business. She claimed the boy needed to learn some manners and insisted someone had to teach him. She dragged the crying boy into our living room. He couldn't have been more than 8 years old, and he was terrified. The boy pleaded to go home, apologizing if they were too loud. My mother ordered him to be quiet. She called him disrespectful, noisy, and rude. She questioned whether his parents taught him anything and declared that Halloween didn't give him the right to disturb people's homes. The boy was sobbing now, his pirate makeup running down his face. I knew I had to do something. I told my mother she needed to let him go, pointing out that what she was doing was kidnapping. My mother dismissed my concerns, saying I was being dramatic. She insisted she was just teaching him a lesson and then she'd send him home. But as the minutes ticked by, I could see lights outside, flashlights moving across neighboring yards. I heard voices calling out a name. The search had begun. My mother started to realize the severity of what she'd done. Her face paled as she looked out the window. She asked nervously why there were so many people outside. I bluntly told her it was because she took someone's child, and asked what did she expect would happen. For the first time, I saw fear in my mother's eyes. She turned to the boy. She apologized to him, admitting she might have overreacted. She offered to take him back to his parents, but it was too late. There was a loud knock at the door, followed by the unmistakable announcement from outside. A police officer identified himself and demanded we open the door. My mother froze, but I ran to the door and opened it. The police officers rushed in, followed by the boy's frantic parents. The reunion was emotional, the boy running into his mother's arms while his father demanded answers. My mother was handcuffed right there in our living room. As they led her away, she kept insisting she was just trying to teach him manners, that she didn't mean any harm. But the damage was done. I was temporarily placed with my aunt, while my mother faced charges of kidnapping and endangering the welfare of a child. The community was shocked. The perfect mom had shown her true colors. During the trial, other stories came out. Neighbors and classmates describing her entitled and often aggressive behavior. The judge wasn't lenient. She received 3 years in prison and mandatory anger management and therapy upon release. My aunt became my legal guardian, and for the first time, I experienced what a normal, loving home felt like. I still visited my mother in prison, watching as she slowly began to recognize her issues. By the time she was released, she was a changed person, humbled and genuinely remorseful. Years later, we've rebuilt a relationship, though it's nothing like before. She volunteers at a community center now, working with troubled parents. Sometimes she talks about that Halloween night as her wake-up call, the moment when her entitlement finally caught up with her. And I finally got to experience Halloween properly last year. I handed out candy with my aunt, smiling at every pirate, princess, and superhero who came to our door. And not once did we complain about the noise. About 2 years ago, my grandfather passed away. It was tough on all of us, but especially on my grandmother. They had been married for 53 years and suddenly she was alone. To help cover the funeral costs, she decided to sell my grandfather's car. It wasn't an easy decision, but practical as always, she knew it was the right thing to do. Just a couple of weeks after the funeral, my grandmother's car decided to give up the ghost. The engine completely blew up, leaving her without transportation. She's always been independent, so before any of us could step in to help, she went ahead and bought herself another car. There was this local dealership, and I use that term very loosely, that was basically just a bunch of used cars parked in someone's front yard with for sale signs slapped on them. The owner talked a good game, telling my grandmother how the Buick she was looking at was gently used and a real bargain. 1 week later, I got a call from my grandmother. She was stranded on the side of the road because the engine in her gently used Buick had completely blown up. When we contacted the seller, his response was infuriating. He told us that not every purchase turns out to be a winner, and sometimes it's just the luck of the draw. My uncle called him directly and got the same response, along with some excuse about how the warranty was voided because of some technical nonsense. There wasn't much we could do legally. The paperwork had enough loopholes to make a lawyer cry. About a month later, my grandmother called my uncle with some troubling news. She explained that her bingo friend Mildred had bought a car from the same man who sold her the Buick, and now Mildred's car wouldn't start either. Apparently, my grandmother's bingo friend had heard about where she got her car, but not about the problems that followed. Bingo was only every 3 weeks, so they hadn't seen each other since the car broke down. Mildred had gone to the same dealer and ended up with the same result, a car that died within weeks of purchase. That's when my uncle started to get really angry. 2 elderly women getting scammed by this shady dealer was too many. And then he heard that another friend, Sandra, was planning to trade in her car. My uncle called her immediately. He asked if she would consider selling her car to him instead of trading it in. Sandra agreed, saying that would be fine as long as he gave her enough money to get another car. My uncle quickly agreed to the deal. They worked out a fair price, and my uncle got the title transferred with a proper bill of sale. But he wasn't planning to drive this car. He had something else in mind. My uncle took Sandra's car and did some maintenance on it. He clogged the radiator with that leak-stopping gunk, did an oil change but deliberately didn't put in enough oil, and did the same with the transmission fluid. Then he drove right over to the shady dealer's yard. My uncle approached the dealer and explained that he was in a tight spot and needed some quick cash, asking if the dealer was interested in buying his car. The dealer looked it over, and being the shark he was, offered my uncle a lowball price, about $400 less than my uncle had paid Sandra. But that was all part of the plan. The dealer asked my uncle why he was selling the car. My uncle casually mentioned that he just needed the money, and added that he had recently done all the maintenance including a fluid flush. He made sure to mention there had been a small leak in the radiator, but claimed he'd fixed it. The dealer didn't ask any more questions. He just saw an opportunity to make a quick profit and took it. The very next day, my uncle's phone rang. It was the dealer, who angrily demanded to know what my uncle had done to the car. He complained that it was completely ruined and there were no fluids in it at all. My uncle threw the dealer's own words back at him, saying that not every purchase gives us a winner and sometimes it's just the luck of the draw. The dealer became even more angry, threatening to sue my uncle. My uncle pointed out that he had only sold him a car with a small leak that he had mentioned, and wished the dealer good luck with any legal action. He then asked the dealer how many more old ladies he was planning to scam that month. When the dealer pretended not to know what my uncle was talking about, my uncle specifically mentioned my grandmother and her friend Mildred. He explained how both had bought cars from the dealer that died within weeks and both received the same response about luck of the draw. My uncle then remarked that it seemed like the dealer's luck had just run out. There was silence on the other end of the line. My uncle pressed his advantage, mentioning that he had a lawyer friend who would be really interested to know about the dealer's business practices. He added that the local news would probably love a story about someone preying on senior citizens. The dealer, now sounding worried, asked what my uncle wanted. My uncle demanded full refunds for both my grandmother and Mildred, and insisted that the dealer close up shop and stop scamming people. The dealer must have realized he was cornered because 2 days later, my grandmother and Mildred both received full refunds for their broken down cars. The dealership in that front yard disappeared shortly after. I'm more of a computer geek than a sports fan. For 2 years, I worked as a photojournalist for a local newspaper. Then I got assigned to the sports section. The schedule was brutal, with professional baseball, basketball, and soccer all happening simultaneously, not to mention school sports events. There were 2 photographers in our section, but since the other guy was older, the editor was more lenient with him. After a year in this section, I was completely burned out. My wife was frustrated because I was leaving for work at 6 a.m. and sometimes not returning until 10 p.m. or later. There was even a stretch when I worked almost 2 months non-stop. I was willing to do it because the pay was excellent. I was making 7 or 8 times the minimum wage. My editor was an old-school journalist who'd been with the newspaper since it started. We used to joke that the building was built around him. He was a total grouch with a terrible temper. During baseball season, after nearly 2 months of non-stop work, I was utterly exhausted. There was a baseball game scheduled for Saturday afternoon, and my editor called me to his office. He told me that he needed me to work that day. I told him that I would do it, but just for the game. I explained that I'd be at the stadium, and when the game ended, I would deliver the material and go home. My boss wasn't happy with this arrangement. He explained that he wanted me there all day because he had other events planned. I refused and suggested he call the other photographer since it was my weekend off. He was furious after my refusal. From then on, he became really rude to me at every opportunity. Since the sports section had an awkward schedule, I had some flexibility with check-in times, and sometimes I was up to half an hour late. One day, I checked in late only to find him waiting at the entrance. He was livid. He scolded me for over an hour and wrote me up with human resources. The memo specified that my work shift was 8 hours, from 7 a.m. until 5:30 p.m. No more, no less. That's when my malicious compliance began. From that day on, I arrived at 7 a.m. sharp and left at exactly 5:30 p.m. After about a week of following these strict rules, my editor approached me at 5:25 p.m. about a university basketball game that needed coverage that night. I looked at him and then at the clock. I told him that I would love to go, but according to the HR memo, my shift ended at 5:30 p.m., so I would see him tomorrow. His face turned red as he threatened to write me up again. With a grin, I reminded him that extra hours were voluntary and I didn't want to do them. Then I walked out. The next day, I arrived at 7 a.m. sharp. My boss approached with a somber face and explained that there had been a misunderstanding about my work hours. He said that since I worked overtime when required, management had decided my work shift could be more flexible and I could arrive a bit later from time to time. I just smiled and thanked him. After that incident, I started giving my family more time, and whenever the editor needed extra hours, he would ask in the nicest possible way. Some companies love to enforce rules, but when those same rules don't work in their favor, they suddenly go out the window. And my editor learned that you can't have it both ways.